Welcome to Infinite Universe with interesting episode. Puma Punku is one of the most mysterious places on Earth. For a very long time, people have been confused and amazed by this strange ancient site. Historians, scientists, and even people who believe in aliens have all tried to figure it out. The most puzzling part is that no one knows exactly how old Puma Punku is. There have been guesses based on other findings near the area, but no one has been able to directly date the huge stone blocks that make up the site. Located high in the Andes Mountains of Bolivia, Puma Punku is made up of massive stones, some of which weigh over 100 tons. These giant blocks have been carved with such precision that people have come up with all kinds of wild ideas to explain them. Some think aliens made them. Others believe they were created by a lost ancient civilization. And some even think time travelers might be involved. But in 2025, new scientific research completely changed what we thought we knew about Puma Punku. Researchers used modern technology to study the site in ways never done before. They used 3D modeling, chemical analysis, and new digging techniques. What they found was surprising. It turns out something truly amazing happened at Puma Punku, and we can finally see it clearly. The results of this research shocked everyone. Even TV host Tucker Carlson said on his show that it changes everything, not just for South American history but for how we understand ancient people all over the world. Before all these recent discoveries, Puma Punku was already famous for being mysterious. It was respected by the native people who lived in the Andes long before Europeans ever arrived. It is located near Lake Titicaca and is part of a larger ancient area known as Tiwanaku. Experts think it was built sometime around 536 to 600 CE by the Tiwanaku civilization. When the Spanish came in the 1500s, they were so shocked by the site that they believed it had to be much older than even the Inca. Some even thought it was built by giants or gods. These ideas didn't go away. In the 1900s, explorers and engineers were still amazed by how perfectly the stones were carved. The stones fit together so tightly, without any mortar, that it looked like something done with modern machines. And how did they move stones that big from far away without wheels? By the 20th century, people came up with all sorts of theories. A famous writer named Erich von Daniken said it was proof aliens had helped. Others thought it was built by a civilization from the Ice Age that had advanced knowledge but was wiped out by a disaster. Most mainstream scientists believed it was made by the Tiwanaku people based on nearby ruins and carbon dating. But the big question was still there: how did they build it? Nobody could explain the amazing precision. That mystery kept people talking for years, and it led to many books, documentaries, and internet debates. The biggest reason Puma Punku is so fascinating isn't just its age or size. It's the feeling that it doesn't belong to its time. It looks like something from a futuristic world, not an ancient one. And that made it even more interesting. All of that changed in 2025. Scientists didn't solve the mystery with guesses or science fiction. They did it with real data and hard work. And the truth is even more impressive than any alien story. The stones at Puma Punku have always been strange, not just because they are big, but because of how carefully they were shaped. Some of the most famous stones are called H-blocks because of their shape. These blocks have perfect angles and smooth surfaces. Engineers say the cuts are as straight as you would expect from a modern factory. Some of them even have grooves, holes, and notches that seem like they were made to connect to other parts. When you look at them closely, they almost look like parts of a machine. What makes it even harder to believe is the type of rock. Most of the blocks are made from a hard volcanic stone called andesite. It is very hard, about as hard as quartz. Carving this with simple tools made of copper or stone, like the Tiwanaku people had, would be extremely difficult. Then there's the size. One of the biggest sandstone blocks weighs around 131 metric tons. Many of the andesite blocks weigh over 20 tons. These stones were brought from quarries that are up to 10 miles away, over hills and rough ground. And they did this without wheels or strong metal tools. So, how did they do it? In 2025, a team of scientists finally started to answer that question. They used advanced 3D laser scanning to get very detailed images of the stones. A team from the University of California, led by archaeologist Dr. Alexei Vanek, studied over 150 stone pieces. They used computer models to see how the broken pieces fit together. It was like solving a massive jigsaw puzzle. What they discovered was that the stones weren't placed randomly. The H-blocks and others were designed to be part of a repeating pattern. They were modular, meaning they were made to fit together in a specific way. The builders of Puma Punku had created a system where each block had a purpose and could be used in multiple ways. This was a big deal because it meant the builders thought ahead. They didn't just shape stones one by one and hope they fit. They had a plan, like using building blocks to create different parts of a structure. The H-blocks weren't just unique shapes, they were part of a system, like pieces of a puzzle. This showed that the people who built Puma Punku were not just artists or laborious. They were engineers with advanced knowledge. They knew how to create something strong and beautiful, using simple tools and a lot of planning. Some of the strange features in the stones, like holes and grooves, were also explained. For a long time, people thought these were just decorations or symbols. But new evidence shows that they were actually used to connect the stones. Researchers found that bronze clamps had been used in some places to hold the stones together. This made the structure very stable, even during earthquakes. Even more surprising was the idea that some of the stones weren't carved at all. Instead, they might have been made using a special ancient cement. In 2025, scientists from Bolivia and France looked closely at the stones using very powerful microscopes. They found tiny details that showed the stone might have been mixed and poured into molds, not carved from a bigger block. This idea is called the liquid stone theory, and now it has real proof. If it's true, it means the people who built Puma Punku were not just great at carving stone. They were also experts in chemistry and construction. They figured out how to crush rock, mix it with other materials, and pour it into molds to make perfect shapes. This would explain how they could make such detailed and perfect blocks using only simple tools. The discoveries continued in 2025. Dr. Vanek's team didn't stop with digital models. They also made small physical versions of the stones using 3D printers. These mini-stones were then put together like a model. This helped them see the full layout of the site. With new photos from drones and laser scans from other Tiwanaku areas, they were finally able to rebuild the original structure of Puma Punku. This wasn't just an image on a screen. The 3D printed blocks were real, and they snapped together just like the original ones probably did. What they created was a platform with steps, doorways, and walkways that all lined up perfectly. Everything was arranged in a way that matched the stars and the sun. The site wasn't just for show. It was a ceremonial place, carefully planned to honor important events in nature, like the solstice. The H-blocks were not just pretty decorations. They were building tools, meant to hold up walls and gates. Their repeated shape made them perfect for reusing in different parts of the structure. It was like the Tiwanaku people had created a language using stone shapes. They could build quickly and safely because each piece was made to fit the others. This was a huge change in how people saw the Tiwanaku culture. They were no longer a mystery. They were master builders who understood design, stability, and sacred geometry long before modern engineers existed. Another amazing part of this research involved virtual reality. A team at Ball State University created a digital twin of Puma Punku. This was a computer model that you could walk through using a VR headset. It let researchers explore the site as it once looked, at full size. They could see how the doorways lined up, how water might have drained, and how everything fit together. This gave them a better view of the design. One important detail they found was that one of the doorways lined up perfectly with the sunrise on the winter solstice. That means the site was part of a bigger plan that included the movement of the sun and stars. It wasn't random. It had deep meaning. Chemical tests on smaller pieces of stone also added to the story. Using strong microscopes and special tools that measure elements, the researchers found chemicals that suggest the stone was made by mixing materials. Some of the stones had signs of bonding agents. These are things that help hold crushed rock together. This is more proof of the geopolymer theory. Not every expert agrees yet, but many now believe the builders used a kind of stone paste that could be poured into molds. This method would allow them to make complex shapes much more easily than carving. It doesn't make the builders look less skilled. It makes them look more advanced. They were using smart techniques that modern scientists only recently started to understand. It shows that the Tiwanaku people had knowledge of materials and building methods that were ahead of their time. All of this changes what we thought we knew about ancient civilizations in South America. Puma Punku was not built by aliens or time travelers. It was built by people who were smart, creative, and determined. They used the tools and materials they had to do things that still amaze us today. And now, thanks to modern science, we can finally see how they did it. Their legacy lives on in the stones they left behind, stones that are no longer a mystery, but a symbol of human genius and determination. They weren't using alien technology. They were creating something of their own. By the middle of 2025, a full reconstruction of Puma Punku was shown to the public in a joint exhibition between Bolivia's National Archaeology Museum and the Smithsonian Institution. For the first time, people were able to walk through a detailed and accurate version of Puma Punku as it may have looked 1,400 years ago. This was not based on guesswork, but on science and knowledge from the local culture. The message was clear: Puma Punku was no longer an unsolved mystery. It was now understood as a brilliant achievement that had been in front of us all along. One of the most debated but increasingly accepted ideas about Puma Punku is that its famous stones, especially the precisely cut andite blocks, were not carved like typical stone. Instead, they may have been made using an ancient version of geopolymer technology, similar to concrete. This idea was once dismissed as a fringe theory, but in 2025, new lab tests gave strong evidence that supported it. These tests showed unusual features in the stones that don't match how natural rocks are formed. This major breakthrough came from a team led by Dr. Joseph Davidovits, a material scientist and founder of the Geopolymer Institute. He has long believed that ancient builders may have used early forms of cement, not just at Puma Punku, but also in places like Egypt. In 2025, scanning electron microscope images of Puma Punku stones revealed microscopic structures that were not normal for natural stone. They showed tiny bubbles trapped in the stone, which are usually found in materials that are poured, not carved. There were also signs of chemical reactions between silicates and alkaline substances, suggesting these stones had been mixed and cast. The grains within the stone were very even, which also suggests human involvement in their creation. Other tests confirmed this. X-ray diffraction and energy-dispersive X-ray spectroscopy revealed the presence of chemical compounds like calcium silicate hydrate and aluminum silicates. These are usually found in modern concrete but not in naturally occurring andite or sandstone. To make sure the findings were accurate, researchers also tested stones from local quarries. Those stones did not show the same chemical makeup or structure as the ones at Puma Punku. This doesn't mean the Tiwanaku people invented concrete in the modern sense, but it does suggest they had developed a unique way to soften or bind stone that hadn't been documented before. They may have used volcanic ash mixed with water and naturally occurring salts to make a kind of early cement. This mixture could be poured into molds, which would explain the perfect shapes of the H-blocks and their interlocking design. Not all stones at Puma Punku show this process. The larger sandstone slabs were likely cut and moved in traditional ways. But the smaller, more detailed andite blocks, especially those with internal channels and perfect symmetry, were probably cast rather than carved. This means the Tiwanaku people combined old and new methods. They used ancient techniques to move massive stones but experimented with new ways to shape them. What makes this so important is not just that it solves an ancient puzzle. It shows that the Tiwanaku people were highly skilled innovators. They weren't copying Egyptian or Mesopotamian techniques. They were inventing their own methods based on the environment, resources, and spiritual beliefs around them. That's why, in 2025, when media figures like Tucker Carlson covered this story, they said, "This changes everything." Not because it points to aliens, but because it proves humans were capable of far more than we used to believe. Sometimes, the real explanation is even more amazing than the myths. To really understand Puma Punku, you also have to understand the minds of the people who built it. The Tiwanaku civilization, which existed from about 500 to 1000 CE, didn't just see architecture as a practical thing. To them, building was a sacred act. Every part of Puma Punku was filled with spiritual meaning. Their beliefs were centered around the idea that the physical world and the spiritual world were deeply connected. According to Tiwanaku mythology, their creator god, Viracocha, came out of Lake Titicaca after a great flood and created the sun, moon, and humans. Lake Titicaca is just a short distance from Puma Punku. According to local stories, Puma Punku is the exact spot where Viracocha started his creation. In 2025, new technologies helped researchers explore this deeper. Satellite surveys and 3D reconstructions showed that Puma Punku was aligned with the sun during the June and December solstices. This matches what was already known about other Tiwanaku temples nearby. More interestingly, the overall layout of Puma Punku follows the shape of the Andean cross, or chacana. This symbol represents the three levels of existence in the Andean belief system: the upper world of gods and stars, Hanan Pasha, the middle world of humans, K Pasha, and the underworld of ancestors, Uku Pasha. The symmetrical H-blocks and sunken plazas may have been designed to reflect this cosmic order. One stairway, rebuilt through 3D models in 2025, showed that its steps were aligned with the movement of the sun throughout the year. Some researchers believe that the site's water channels were used to create pools that reflected the sky, merging heaven and earth during religious ceremonies. The name Puma Punku itself means door of the puma in the local language. The puma was a powerful symbol of change and strength in Andean culture. The word door could refer to a portal between different worlds, which is supported by the temple's structures that don't lead into rooms, but instead frame specific views of mountains and stars. When you look at it this way, the extreme precision of the stonework at Puma Punku was not just about engineering skill. It was about religious devotion. Every line and angle had spiritual importance. This is perhaps the most powerful part of what researchers found in 2025. Puma Punku wasn't built just to stand the test of time. It was built to send a message across time. It was meant to speak to the gods, to the stars, and to people in the future. And now, we are finally able to hear that message. The events of 2025 changed everything we thought we knew about Puma Punku. For years, the site was surrounded by wild theories. People believed it was built by aliens or by a forgotten global civilization. The stones were too perfect. The site was too strange. But now, because of advanced scientific tools and a deeper respect for the knowledge of the people who lived there, the truth is clear. And it's even more amazing than the myths. What researchers found wasn't proof of aliens. It was proof of genius. The Tiwanaku people had an advanced understanding of materials, engineering, and astronomy. By using 3D scans, chemical tests, and digital reconstructions, scientists were able to rebuild large parts of the site. What they discovered is that the so-called mysterious H-blocks were actually part of a well-organized building system. They were like ancient Lego pieces, designed to fit together. Some of these stones, especially the intricate andite blocks, showed signs of being made with geopolymer techniques. These early forms of concrete were created by mixing crushed stone with natural chemicals. The tests showed tiny bubbles, bonding materials, and even grain patterns that don't exist in natural stone. This shows that the Tiwanaku were experimenting with chemistry long before modern science had names for these processes. But again, the most amazing part isn't just the science. It's the purpose behind the building. The Tiwanaku weren't just making temples. They were building spiritual machines. The layout of Puma Punku matched the direction of the sunrise during solstices. The site reflected the chacana, the sacred symbol of the universe. The stone gateways framed the sky and distant mountains. Water channels reflected the stars. The name, the shape, the purpose, everything about Puma Punku was meant to connect humans with something bigger. The builders were not just workers. They were priests, astronomers, and engineers all working together. Their technology is impressive, but their vision is even more so. In 2025, when this information was shared with the world through journals, museums, and virtual reality experiences, the reaction was huge. Schools began updating their history lessons. Museums changed their displays. Historians started comparing the Tiwanaku to ancient Greece, Egypt, and Mesopotamia. Finally, the Tiwanaku were getting the recognition they deserved as one of the world's great civilizations. Political commentator Tucker Carlson even said on a popular show, "This changes everything." And he was right. Because Puma Punku became more than just a place. It became a symbol. A symbol that shows how wrong we've been in writing history. For too long, the achievements of indigenous cultures were ignored or explained away. But the truth is, these people didn't get help from aliens. They helped themselves. They reached for the stars in their own way. So now, we've reached the end of a long road. We've gone from confusion to understanding. From fantasy to fact. From looking down on ancient cultures to honoring their brilliance. And in doing so, we haven't made Puma Punku less special. We've made it even more extraordinary. It turns out, the real story was never hidden. It was right there, waiting to be seen. A story of brilliant minds who used what they had to build something that would last forever. Something that connected the earth to the sky, and the past to the future. And that story, finally told, is more inspiring than any alien legend. So the question is no longer, who built Puma Punku? We now know the answer. The Tiwanaku did. The real question now is, what else have we missed, ignored, or misunderstood about ancient cultures? Because if one group of people in the Andes, without wheels, without writing, and without metal tools, could build something this advanced at 12,000 feet above sea level, then our understanding of human history may need to change completely. Thanks for watching. Keep it and stay tuned. Like and subscribe our channel. Have a good day.